November 1968, London. The market on Portobello Road opened at 7. By 8, the smell of frying onions had mixed with the cold off the street, and the covered section near the far end was beginning to fill. Jimmy had a show that night. Hammersmith. Sound check at 4. He had 6 hours. He always walked before a show. No destination. Just streets, air, whatever the city decided to put in front of him. He came around a corner and saw the banner. Antique and craft fair. A handful of people filing in through a side door. He almost kept walking. Inside, the first thing he noticed was the glass. Cases everywhere. Long ones, tall ones. Glass boxes lined up like museum exhibits. Behind each pane, guitars. A 1954 Les Paul with a tag that started with 4 digits. A Martin D28 with a crack along the top that someone had turned into a selling point. Beautiful instruments, all of them. Every single one locked away. Jimmy stopped in front of one case, pressed his hand flat against the glass. Not because he wanted the guitar. He just wanted to feel if it was cold. It was. He moved on. The center of the market was loud in a quiet way. Laptops open, cables running across the floor, men in dark jackets talking about prices. Nobody playing anything, nobody asking to. He passed a row of amplifiers, a rack of effects pedals, a table selling guitar straps with foreign flags stitched on them. Then something changed in the air. Not a sound, a smell, sawdust, old wood, something underneath, varnish maybe, or the particular dry smell of wood that's been waiting a long time. He knew that smell. He followed it without thinking, through the thinning crowd, past the last row of bright stands, toward the back wall where the light came in lower. There were 3 tables pressed into the far corner. A woman selling records, a man with a rack of handmade wooden flutes, and at the very end, pushed against the wall like an afterthought, a table covered in dark cloth. 12 guitars on it, all different, all quiet. The man behind the table was maybe 68, canvas jacket, leather apron, white hair, hands resting on the table edge, knuckles like old roots. He wasn't looking at anyone. There was no one to look at. Under the table, a black violin case, worn at the corners, the clasp polished. Someone had kept the case clean, even if they hadn't opened it in a while. Jimmy was still a few steps away when he heard the voice. A younger man, mid-30s, good shoes, standing across from the old man with a folded brochure in his hand. Arthur, he set the brochure on the table. I'm being serious. Nobody's coming for these. You know that. The old man, Arthur, didn't look at the brochure. There's a place in Kensington, the younger man continued. Warm rooms, 3 meals. Derek. Arthur's voice was low, flat. Go back to your table. Derek stayed a moment longer, the way people do when they think patience is the same as being right. Then he left. Arthur looked at the brochure. Didn't touch it. His hand moved to the edge of the table and stayed there. Jimmy walked up. Arthur looked at him the way you look at anyone who comes to the wrong table by accident, waiting for the moment they realize their mistake and turn around. You want to look, Arthur said, but I'm closing up soon. Don't waste my time. Jimmy didn't answer. He picked up one of the guitars, turned it over, ran his thumb along the seam where the back met the sides. Then he pressed the body lightly against his ear and tapped the top with 2 fingers. The sound came back clean. How long did this top season? Jimmy asked. Arthur was quiet for a second. 18 years, he said. Alpine spruce. Came from a dealer in the Tyrol. I've had it longer than some men have been married. He said it without warmth, but the edge left his voice when he said it. Something else took its place. Jimmy set the guitar back down gently. He looked at the others. Then his eyes went to the floor, the violin case. He reached for it without thinking. Arthur's hand came across the table fast, caught Jimmy's wrist. Not hard, but certain. Don't. Jimmy looked up. Arthur's face hadn't changed much, but something behind his eyes had moved. That belongs to my Meg. A breath. Only her hands go near it. Jimmy let go. I understand, he said. He meant it. You could hear that he did. He picked up a guitar, sat down on an empty crate beside the table, adjusted it on his knee, left hand on the neck, Right hand open over the strings. No pick, no amp, no pedals. Just nylon strings and spruce, and a corner of the market that nobody had come to all morning. He closed his eyes, and then he started to play. The first chord just sat in the air. Not loud, not anything like what people expected from him. The guitar was small and the room was large, and there was no electricity anywhere in what he was doing. But that first chord hung there longer than it should have. He played Little Wing the way a man plays something he learned in private. Not performing it, not showing it, just letting it move through the wood. The melody came out in pieces. Slow, then faster, then slow again. His thumb held a bass line underneath, while his fingers worked the higher strings. It sounded like more than one instrument, like a conversation someone was having with themselves in an empty room. Arthur didn't move. His eyes were watching Jimmy's left hand. The way it moved, the way it stopped moving and let the string do the rest. He'd built that guitar. He knew every place where it strained, every note that came out thinner than it should. This man was finding sounds in it that Arthur hadn't known were there. His chin moved. He caught it. He looked at the violin case under the table. He didn't decide to. That was the thing he'd try to explain later, to himself, in the shop late at night. His hands just went there. He opened the clasp, lifted the violin out. Meg had been the last one to hold it, 5 months ago, before her hands had stopped cooperating, before the doctor started using words that required a second opinion. Arthur put it under his chin, reached for the bow, held it over the strings without touching them. Then he played. It wasn't perfect. His bow arm had never been strong. He'd always been the one behind the table while she played. He knew the mechanics from watching her for 30 years, but mechanics and music are different things. Still, the violin and the guitar found each other the way old sounds do. Not immediately, not cleanly. But once they locked in, the corner of that market changed. The concrete above caught the sound and threw it back. Nothing escaped. It just kept building, folding back on itself, turning the back wall into something that didn't behave like a wall anymore. Jimmy played the melody. Arthur built beneath it. Low notes, careful, half a century of understanding wood and resonance in every stroke. His bow hand shook slightly. He knew why. He didn't stop. The woman at the records table stopped sorting. 40 feet away at the bright stand near the center, Derek looked up from a conversation. He went quiet. One by one, people in the main aisle slowed down, stopped, turned. Nobody said anything. They just moved toward the sound, the way you move toward warmth without deciding to. A young woman near the back leaned toward her friend and whispered. He looked at his phone, pulled up a photograph, looked at the man playing the guitar, looked again. The record woman leaned close to Arthur without interrupting the music. Arthur, do you know who that is? A musician, Arthur said. It's Jimi Hendrix. The bow stayed on the strings. The notes continued. Arthur's eyes moved to the man in front of him. The wide hat, the rings, eyes still closed, still somewhere inside the music. The man he'd told, don't waste my time. Arthur kept playing, because Meg's violin had already started. And once it started, stopping it wasn't something he was able to do. The last note came from the guitar. The violin let it go first. Silence. Then someone clapped and everyone followed. Not the kind that fills arenas. The kind that happens when 30 strangers realize they've just shared something they didn't plan to share. Jimmy opened his eyes. He looked at Arthur first. Arthur was holding the violin against his chest, both hands wrapped around the body of it, not playing, just holding. His back was straight. His jaw was set. His eyes were bright. Old-timers don't cry in front of strangers, but sometimes keeping still costs more than moving. Jimmy pulled a pen from his jacket pocket. He didn't ask. He picked up the first guitar, turned it over, and signed the back. Then the second. Arthur watched him work through all 12. Didn't speak, didn't stop him. The first buyer came forward before the echo had fully cleared. A man in his 60s. Set 300 pounds on the table without negotiating. My granddaughter plays, he said. This one's hers. By the time Arthur understood what was happening, 6 guitars were gone. 40 minutes later, the table was empty. The crowd thinned. Arthur filled 2 cups from a thermos that had gone cold. He handed one to Jimmy. They sat without talking for a while. The violin, Jimmy said eventually. She teach herself? I taught her to hold it. She taught herself the rest. Arthur looked at the case. We used to do all these fairs together. She'd play. People would stop. Then sometimes they'd buy a guitar. He paused. She can't play anymore. Her hands. He didn't finish the sentence. Jimmy turned the cup in his fingers. His mother had played guitar, sang too. She'd gone when he was young enough that the memory wasn't really a memory, more like a tone. A warmth in a room that was gone before he understood it had been there. He didn't say any of that. He stood. Hammersmith tonight, he said. Your name's at the door. Arthur looked at him, recognition arriving late. I don't go to many concerts these days, he said. Bring the violin, Jimmy said. He picked up his hat, held out his hand. Arthur shook it, craftsman's grip, the kind that says something without saying it. Then Jimmy walked back through the market, past the glass cases, past the bright stands and out into the cold November air. Arthur sat alone at the empty table. He looked at the nursing home brochure, folded it once, then again, pushed it into his pocket. He found the payphone near the entrance. Meg picked up on the third ring. He tried to speak, couldn't for a moment. It's me, he said. Good day today. I'll explain when I'm home. She said something. He laughed, short, surprised. Yes, he said. I'll stop by the chemist, the prescription. He hung up, packed the empty cases, lifted the violin case by its handle, nodded to the record woman, and walked toward the door. Good afternoon, Arthur, she called after him. He nodded once. The shop opened on a quiet street in Islington 2 years later. Webb guitars, handmade, plain letters on the glass, sawdust on the bench every morning, alpine spruce drying in the back, the smell of wood and cold tea that never quite left the air. Meg sat near the front window most days, violin in her lap. The medication had helped. Her hands had come back, not entirely, but enough. Some mornings she played quietly while Arthur worked. He'd hear it from his bench and not look up. Just listen. On the wall near the door, one guitar hung on a simple hook, a small card beneath it. Made 1968, signed by Jimi Hendrix. Not for sale. Derek passed the shop once, stopped at the window.